So we're all very grateful and thankful that you all made it to this wonderful workshop that we are hosting and facilitating. Thank you for allowing us to give you the right steps into creating your UC's, UW's application. And so hopefully after all this is said and done, you guys can come out learning new things and having a new reinvigorated passion for applications. Because I know that requires a lot of passion to do. Before we get started, introductions are to be held. My name is Joel Sitanggang. I am a PERMIAS officer in the academic department. I am currently a first year transfer in UCLA, majoring in psychology. And I transferred from Shoreline Community College. Woo.
Hi everyone, I'm Odelia. I'm also a PERMIAS National officer. I'm a UC Berkeley student at the moment. I'm a second year transfer and I transferred from Santa Monica College. And at UC Berkeley right now I'm studying molecular and cell biology.
All right, and we should also have one other PERMIAS officer here.
I'm here,
He
guys.
is here.
All right. Hello, guys. My name is Jason, AJ for short. I transferred into UC Berkeley as an economics and data science minors, and I've transferred from De Anza College.
All right, thank you everyone. So yeah, with that, before we begin, I would like to ask everyone if they could change their Zoom name to their name, obviously, and their college or university. So if you're here as a prospective college transfer, please name your college in your Zoom. And if you're one of our representative university students, please change it to your respective universities. Thank you. And I will be checking. So yeah, just change your Zoom name. All right. And one other thing before we get right started, if we could all refrain from asking questions until later on, we'll have a short Q&A session after the presentations are done. But if you guys are trying to hold off your questions, please just type them in the chat and we'll get to them in due time. And so yeah, with all that said and done, let's get started. So let's look at our events for today. First, we'll go through personal insight questions. This is specifically for the UC applications because we here understand how intensive the UC applications can be in terms of writing the personal insight questions, and the essays themselves are a large part of the decision-making process at the admissions officer. Then we'll look through extracurriculars and activity sections, give you the tips and tricks to create a very robust list. Next up, we have the academic requirements for transfer students. That's also very important in terms of logistics. We have recommendation letters, which is rather rare, but it's important to note if your prospective university requires it. Differences between UC applications and private schools. If you guys are wondering the differences between the UCs or the USC, more private schools in the area, we'll get to that. Helpful resources for transferring, of course, anything, all that good stuff. And the last part is networking, where we're going to invite you guys to join breakout rooms for some specific talks with your prospective unis. Yes. All right, so let's begin with the first one, personal insight questions. Now, next slide, please. Next slide.
One second.
All right, we're currently experiencing some technical.
Oh, wait, here we go. There we go.
All right. Doesn't want us to teach you guys, unfortunately.
There we go.
All right, so let's begin with UC personal insight essays, or what I like to call them, writing about yourself, but in different fonts. So that's, hopefully you guys don't look like this distressed dog right now. But if you are, that's fine. We're here to alleviate some of your pain by giving you general tips and tricks. No, that was a good slide. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right. So The first tip I would like to give is keeping it simple. So as soon as you think of UCs, you think of prestige, you think of, oh, I need to like sell myself really well. And while we do expect everyone to sell themselves really well, it doesn't mean having to sell yourself to be this grandeur person. Sometimes you see applications we just require something simple, because at the end of the day, we're all just still the same like children we are. Thank you. I do love my memes. Next one, avoid flowery language. Now, admittedly, I am very familiar with flowery language. You'll see I added my own sections, some excerpts for examples from my own UC application, and you could tell that I love me some affectatious language, but we would like to avoid that for this instance, because if you place yourselves in the shoes of a UC admissions officer, they have to go through thousands of papers. They don't want to read your pertainings or any of these like big words just to show off that you're smarter than the rest of us. No, they know you're smarter. Yeah, they know you're smart. You just need to show how you can be smart with context. And now use shorter sentences. These three tips kind of like encapsulate the idea of we want to keep it simple and we want to keep it steadfast, simple but effective, kind of. Next, meaning over major. Now, this is rather important because personally, from asking a lot of my friends who transferred from community colleges, one biggest advice they received was keeping it meaningful. So your essays are the only time, if you really think about it, in your applications where you can truly show yourself. So if you use your essays just to remind the admissions officer of your amazing accolades, they don't appreciate that. They can read as well. You know, they can read your activities list. Use this opportunity to show why you personally believe in your meaningful beliefs. And so meaning over major could also mean the idea of finding topics. Like not everyone has met the president. Not everyone has met Joko Widodo himself. So it's fine if you haven't. It's some amazing essays are done over the simplest topics. Oh, I helped my sister with her homework. Something simple, but if it's meaningful and you portrayed it as something so meaningful to you, then they'll understand and it'll get translated. Next one, do not plagiarize. I don't know why we should keep repeating this, but I feel like it should be said. Do not plagiarize anything. Very hard to plagiarize because this is a very personal essay, but you'd be surprised on what college students can do. So do not plagiarize. It's an academic crime. Next, avoid being prideful. Now, I've admittedly have been susceptible in the past for this. When they're reading your essays, they don't want to hear about how amazing of a person you are. They want to hear how you are as a person. And so do not tell them, oh, I'm this amazing thing, I'm doing that amazing thing. They don't want to hear all of that. They can surmise that from your activities list. What they want to know is what are you as a person? Utilize your college writing resources. Now, this is something that I tell everyone, like this is so important. So I came from Shoreline Community College and we had the Writer Center there. And I was a permanent resident there when it was like the deadline was coming up, because I kept revising with the people there. And you'd be surprised at how many people work in the writing centers in your respective colleges that actually have been to the UCs. Like one of my favorite writing center teachers was graduated from UC Berkeley. And so a lot of the time I would just ask her, hey, if you read this, would you let me in, you know? And really it's just using that resources. They're there for a reason. So please do that. Do not like think that there's some menial thing. No, they're very important and could mean the difference between getting in and getting not in, if that makes sense. Next, be who you are. Now, this is very, very important, pertaining back to what I said previously. College admissions officers know that you do a lot of stuff. It's in your activities section. What they want to know from your essays is who you are as a person. You can be the captain of the soccer team, but that's not who you really are, right? You have other things. You have hopes, dreams, and aspirations. They want to know all of that. So let's go one by one to each of the UC prompts. Next slide. All right, so question 0. Please describe how you have prepared for your intended major, including your readiness to succeed in your upper division courses once you enroll at the university. I just basically condensed it to why do you like your major and what activities did you do to cultivate your interests both outside and inside the classroom. Now, this is a very, very hard prompt. Why? Because it's the only required prompt. Out of all of the 7 This one is technically 0 because it's not included in the 7 that you choose. This one is required. So that means all the admissions officers will read everyone's answer to this question. So first tip, try to stand out. Really think outside the box. Make yourself differentiate yourself from the rest of the pack by doing some creative methods, by writing in a creative way, maybe adding an anecdote that's very personal to you. Try to be specific on why you chose such a major. For example, in psychology, you normally get the question of, oh, why are you in psychology? Why are you in your major? And although like you could always say, oh, because I like this major, that's not going to cut it, unfortunately, in this essay. You're going to have to be a lot more specific. The more specific you are, the better they have an understanding of your, I guess, mental processes in the major. So you can't come into a major expecting to say, oh, I like math, so I'm in math. Well, why do you like math? You really need to dig deep. We all have our unconscious beliefs, I guess, that led us to enjoying the major we do enjoy. Now, the last tip is focus on quality of activities and not quantity of activities. So you notice how they basically want you to describe not only why you like your major, but what you did to cultivate your enjoyment or your interest in the said major. And a lot of people tend to fall into this hole of basically saying like, oh, I like math, so I'm president of the math club. Like, that's great. And we see that in your activities section, but what did that gain? What did you gain from being the president? Did you learn more about certain math problems? Were you stumped about a certain math problem because your members were providing you different math perspectives? Just essentially be more than your major in the section, but also explaining the rationale behind. So I added a little meme. I chose my college major by just randomly combining words. I think sounds like fun together, which is honestly not far from the truth, but don't say that. All right, let's move on to the next question. Now we're moving on to the questions where you get to choose whether or not. But before that, let's do an example. This is an example or an excerpt from my college essay. I'm being very vulnerable with you guys right now. I'm sharing my college essay answers. Like, okay. So I'll read it out. In early primary school, I would spend a lengthy amount of recess time simply observing. As I watched my fellow playmates, perplexing questions about the intent behind their actions and words began occupying my curious mind. Questions that I would soon learn are fundamental inquiries in the academic world of psychology. Ever since my exposure to the field, I have devoted a considerable portion of my scholarly efforts to engrossing myself in psychological literature in hopes of quenching my younger self's rudimentary questions. Amazing. I love myself. Thank you, Joel, for that amazing example. However, again, let's try not to use flowery words. I very susceptible to that. But basically, this was my hook. Essentially, I basically gave a background. My love for psychology came from a younger age. It was more innate than anything. But a lot of people's majors weren't innate. A lot of them came from a good teacher they liked in high school or a parent's similar interest in that. So really just be more specific and don't give a generic answer. That's what we're trying to hope for. All right, next question. Question 1, describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time, aka how do you define leadership and how did you portray that definition? Now, this is rather interesting. You would think on surface level, this is just essentially an essay where you can talk about your leadership positions, like, oh, I was the leader of this club, I was the leader of this organization. Well, not necessarily. Looking at it deeply, this is basically, they want to find your definition of leadership, because leadership, although there is a commonly accepted definition, in terms of its nuance, there's different levels of leadership, and they want to know your level of leadership. And once you've defined that level of leadership, they want you to exemplify with your past experiences how you portrayed that definition. So first tip, think outside the box. This is a very common and popular essay question because, again, everyone wants to show off, like, oh, I want to talk about how I was the president of this club. So this is the perfect opportunity to tell them. Well, yes, it is the perfect opportunity. Again, please define your leadership and define how that opportunity helped you grow your leadership understanding. Leadership can be occupying an official role in a club, duh, but it can also be being a good older sibling. So what this tip is saying is essentially leadership is defined by you. Like, you can be a good leader, can be someone who is the president of this club, but a good leader could also be just a person who's a good sibling, a good sibling with quality leadership aspirations, So anything can be a definition of leadership as long as you can convince the admissions officer that it's a good definition. And the last point is focus on your impact and not the impact of a greater organization. A lot of people tend to say, oh, when I was president of this organization, I accumulated 50 million in sponsors. Well, that's great and all. What part of that was your influence and what part of that was your team's influence? You know, a lot of that can be overlap, but you also have to specify that because of me, or this is my contribution to that. This is how I, as a leader, was able to guide my team into that amazing feat. If you did like actually get 50 million sponsors, come to PERMIAS. I'm kidding. Next question, or actually no, let's give an example. All right, so this was an excerpt from someone I know. They allowed permission, but they want to remain anonymous. That day, I discovered honesty's best friend, empathy. I thought telling Serge the cold truth about his behavior would finally help him see that he was wrong to blow off the gym. But my honesty was my subjective opinion. When I later talked to Serge, I learned about the fears that had kept him from self-motivation. He had never been athletic, and he had found it hard to believe that putting himself through a physical ordeal would be useful. He was already berating himself enough in his head. I didn't need to do it for him. Since that experience, I've exercised more empathy when asked to lead. So notice how this was a small experience of leadership, a small showcase. This writer didn't say, oh, I was the president of the gym and I taught this person how to do bicep curls. No, they were just a gym buddy to them, but they were able to explain it in such a meaningful way that it translated their understanding of empathy. And then they further on explained how such empathy would be used in further leadership opportunities. That was really good. No wonder they got in. All right, next question. So question 2 is, every person has a creative side, and it can be expressed in many ways: problem solving, original and innovative thinking, and artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side, or how I like to say, how do you define creativity and how did you portray that definition? Similarly to question 1, instead of leadership, we moved on to creativity, or the actions of your creative side. So once again, popular topic. So be prepared to stick out from the crowd. A lot of the reason why UCs allow you to choose out of the 7 is they also want to test like your ability to plan ahead, like your ability to see, oh, which out of the 7 would you excel at? And so if you choose this question, you better be prepared to give like your everything to make sure you stand out, because other people will also choose this question, because it's a very, like, I'm not trying to compare all of the questions, but it's a very nice topic to talk about, like talking about your creativity. Isn't that something everyone wants to talk about? The second point is expression of creativity has no bounds, from dance to karate. So creativity, a lot of people denote it to the ideas of the arts. So dancing, singing, while those are definitely artistic, there are many facets of creativity. Like karate can be creative. You can be creative in sumo wrestling. You can be creative in origami. So don't try to limit yourself. And that's also another neat way of standing out from the crowd, is to provide your creative side in a unique package outside of just the usual common areas. And the last point is focus on how the creative act help you grow. Now, again, like they don't want to talk about how you won first place in your singing competition. They want to know what that made you feel and the struggles you went through to achieve such an achievement. Now let's move on to examples for this question. Right, so this one I got from the internet. Art itself is a nuanced word, possessing evolving meanings throughout my life. As a boy, art meant drawing Power Rangers. As a young adult, art serves as a medium where I can impose my feelings and thoughts upon the world, devoid of concerns about others' approval or disapproval. Wow, really powerful. And this was their hook. And so you can already tell, like, they have a very nuanced understanding. I mean, they use the word and all of that. So it's a very good hook, because it hooks you into understanding their definition of their creativity in the form of art. And although they used art, which is again a very common form of creative expression, they did it and shaped it and packaged it in a way that was personable to them. Like they talked about drawing Power Rangers, you know, like a lot of artists perhaps don't draw Power Rangers, and they did, and so they exemplified that. All right, next question. All right, So next question is, what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? Or AKA, what is a skill you find meaningful to you and how did you cultivate that? So this one is personally my favorite question because this is where you can actually talk about one thing that you're really, really passionate about. Not saying that you can't talk about anything you're passionate about in the other questions, but this one's a skill or talent, which I assume most people are very passionate about. So I want to emphasize that anything can be a skill or talent. Like you'd be surprised at how many times people have talked about the randomest things being their tried and true skill and talent. And as long as they can back it up with passion and meaningful experiences, admissions officers are going to accept it. Because who's to say that, like, I don't know, shark surfing isn't a skill or talent? I don't know what shark surfing is, but that could be a skill or talent under the right hands. All right, so the next point is focus on how meaningful it is for you, not just how awarded you are because of it. Now, this is another plot hole people tend to erroneously enter, and that is, oh, I'm gonna show off all of my accolades, and that will translate to me being seen as amazing in my talents. Like, you don't have to, they can tell that you're good at something without you having to enumerate all of your accolades. You can do that through amazing writing. You can do that through passionate storytelling. You don't have to do it through lists, you know, like, oh, my greatest talent is public speaking, and here's why. And you went through all of the MUNs, you went through all of the public speaking competitions. No, they want to know how you achieve that and how you cultivate it so you could achieve such accolades. And then the last point is be comprehensive about this talent. You have to explain every facet of this talent. They want to know the what, where, when, and how of this talent. They want to know how you developed it, how you demonstrated it, not just the enumerated list of all of your achievements again. Now, because I like this question, the next example is my excerpt. So if we move on. All right, so this is my hook for this question. I was an unusual fetus for my mother to carry. Whoa. Unlike most childbirths, I gave my mother a hard time by accidentally wrapping the umbilical cord around my neck. The doctors reassured my mother with a lighthearted joke, describing me as an active child, and an ostensibly normal baby was born until I opened my mouth. So personally, that's a great hook, an amazing hook even. So I went on to talk about my passion of public speaking and communication. And if you could already like see, that was kind of like a really good way to transfer to that. And so I just wanted to use this example to show you that like you can really just talk about anything, like, and nothing's off the table. Like I just talked about childbirth and I got in. So truly an amazing system. Let's move on to the next question. So question 4, describe how you've taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or worked to overcome an educational barrier you have faced. AKA, what academic opportunities have you taken and how did it benefit you as an individual? Or what is an educational barrier you overcame? Now, this question is really interesting because technically it's 2 questions in one. The first question is talking about an advantage that you took from an educational opportunity, while the other one is talking about an educational barrier. So you don't actually have to answer both. I mean, if you want to, you can. But personally, and I'm speaking for a lot of the admissions officer, you should probably focus on one aspect of this question because it's essentially asking you 2. For the first aspect, how you took an advantage of an educational opportunity, my best tips are best opportunity to talk about any academic activities you went through. So really think about this question and really think about the best opportunity that you've given, because I'm pretty sure we've been fortunate enough to experience a lot of good opportunities, but it's really hard to really pinpoint one certain one, but that's exactly how you have to do it here. I mean, I would assume it's a lot nicer to have one good opportunity you took and really flesh it out compared to several opportunities where you couldn't really flesh out each and every one of them. Next point is focus on how that made you feel and less on your achievements. And so in this instance, I guess you can definitely talk a lot about your achievements because of this educational opportunity, but again, focus on your feelings, on how that academic opportunity or educational opportunity really helped you engage in the material. Get nerdy. This is the time where you can really talk about jargon, like really explain this educational opportunity. If you went to a STEM class or a STEM camp, really explain it, like add jargon to show them that you know what you're talking about, for example. My advice for the second portion, or how you overcame an educational barrier, is to appeal to emotion. This is the one time, well, not necessarily the one time. This is one of the few instances where you can definitely appeal to the more emotional side, more feeling less logic side of the essay, because they actually, you have to push a certain narrative about yourself. And although pity points don't exist, subconsciously they do. So yes, really appeal to the emotions of the admissions officer when you're writing about your overcoming of educational barriers. An example of this would be, so this one was an excerpt talking about the second, not the second part, sorry, the later half of the question, which was overcoming an educational barrier. As a product of a school system where math and science are prized above the humanities, I had to convince my parents that studying philosophy in books and movies was a good way to spend the summer, and I came back personally certain that it had been. I could now see big themes and meaning in popular culture and in books I read, and before I was unsure of how to integrate my interest in things other people thought of as abstract, religion, philosophy, history, books, and film, my summer class showed me that ideas like religion and philosophy can serve as lenses to analyze the past and popular culture, or as the material that we use in writing books or making films. Good for them, good for them. So they kind of overcame this like idea of like the narrative that they should be able to focus on STEM, and that would be the only thing that leads them to a greater academic virtue. But actually, once they came to the summer camp, they learned that there are other aspects of academia that doesn't pertain to STEM, such as like the humanities and social sciences. And this, I added this because this was also a plus, because they also technically talked about the first part. So they actually created an answer that answered both questions. Even though both questions asked for two ostensibly different answers, they somehow managed to merge it, because they talked about how this summer camp was also an educational opportunity that was advantageous for them. Pretty good stuff. Next question. Describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you have taken to overcome this challenge. How has this challenge affected your academic achievement? Or what did you personally consider was a significant challenge, and how did it affect your academics, and how did you overcome it? Now, one thing I want to say is challenge is subjective. Like, a lot of people find certain things more challenging than others, and that's completely fair. Admissions officers aren't here to judge you. They're not here to analyze, oh, you have a weak constitution because you think doing your math homework is a challenge. Like, no, they're not here to do that. They're just here to understand what you're telling them. And if you tell them that, oh, this math homework is genuinely a challenge for me, and here's why, you definitely basically caught them. You like have them hooked. So as long as you can prove it to be challenging, nothing's off the table. Now, this question is susceptible to cliches since everyone faces adversity. Now, this is another popular question, because this question, again, with the past question, you can appeal to emotion with this one. Definitely, you can definitely appeal to emotion. You can have some half-baked challenge that you had to overcome, but as long as you appeal to their emotion, it would work. Well, not necessarily, because if you aren't very attentive with what you're writing, you can definitely see a lot of cliches like, oh, this teacher pulled me out of this mentality with their amazing words and stuff like that. That's definitely cliche. And again, admissions officers will have to read thousands of applications. There is 100% chance that one other person in like a different area of study or a different like country of you said a similar thing. And that's not going to be good for your case. Now, the last step is focus on making the struggle and successes personal. Now this, I mean, all of the questions you need to be personal, but I feel like for this one, you genuinely have to be very personal. Like a lot of people face challenges, but you should try to gear towards why you find this personally challenging. You can choose a topic that is, again, universal, like doing math, but you should make it or package it in a way that seems like it's personal to you, or a personal attack, you know? All right, an example would be, It was October my junior year when my mom learned she had breast cancer. It was terrifying. I couldn't eat or sleep. I went to school exhausted, helped with errands, and tried to juggle classes and extracurriculars. My energy began to drop, as did my grades. Unexpectedly, it was tennis that helped me overcome this academically and personally challenging period. Since I was 6, my dream was to win a tennis tournament, but I struggled with the pressure of competition. I foreshadowed my loss prior to a match, allowing my nerves to take over. My body trembled. It was difficult to breathe. By the end of middle school, my losses outweighed my wins, and I no longer believed in myself. But it didn't end there. This was paragraph 2 and 3, if I remember correctly. And then they talked about how one of their head coaches gave them really amazing words, but they kind of made a unique twist on it, because they took the advice of their coach, but then they had to take time to actually do it. So most people would say, oh, my professor said these amazing words and I suddenly changed overnight. Like I was Albert Einstein with after hearing their amazing advice. No, this person kind of gave a very rooted in reality answer by saying, oh, I really, really tried to practice his advice. Eventually I did, and then that's how I grew. Next question. Question 6, what have you done to make your school or your community a better place? What have you contributed to making the school/community a better place, and how did it personally make you feel? So this one is my second favorite because I'm all about that community life and community love. And so this is a great way for you to really express that. Talk about your contributions that resonate with you. Now, I truly believe that each one of us contributed something to the community. But with this question, you generally have to talk about something that you contributed that really resonated with you, something that you can find personally. Like, for example, perhaps you did something like you did charity service, although to the naked eye or on the surface level, everyone does charity service. But if this certain charity service experience resonated with you, like it really touched home, talk about it, talk about how meaningful that is. And it's very much valid. On the flip side, there are people who just talk about their charity work. Like they enumerate like, oh, I built houses for Habitat of Humanity. I started my own NGO to save penguins. Like, okay, we see that in your activities section, probably. Like, how did you personally contribute to that? How does that even resonate with you? What do you even like about penguins, you know? So second point, translate passion for what you are contributing. Exactly like the first one, really show them that this is the reason why you're passionate and this is why, because again, you can say everything, but if you don't talk about what those everything did to you, like personally to you, or how you found passion in doing such everythings, then it wouldn't really matter. It would just be words on a computer, I guess. Aim for humility. Again, this stress on your compassions rather than your achievements. Although this question is telling you what contributions you did to make the school good, so basically they're asking you to paint yourself as like the hero, try to practice some humility as well. They don't want you to be like, oh, I was the Superman of my high school or community college. Like, no, calm down. Like, be more humble in your approaches. And again, because of my second favorite, I am taking an excerpt from my personal UC application for the example. Utilizing my seat in the student government, I submitted a proposal for the construction of more functioning gender-neutral bathrooms around campus grounds. I went into detail about the significance of gender-neutral bathrooms and fostering an inclusive community, as well as noting down a list of pre-existing bathrooms that have the potential to be converted into gender-neutral ones. After some productive deliberation with college representatives and numerous bathroom trips, my proposal was accepted by the college board to much fanfare from the club. It felt like I could finally send out a love letter to the first community that accepted me for who I am on campus. I am content in knowing that I played a considerable role in improving my school's community for future generations to come. My prospective university will also not be exempt from my ambitious aspirations for the community. So for context, this was talking about a club that had issues with the gender neutral bathrooms in my past community college. And so utilizing my seat, I was able to send out a proposal essentially. And so if you notice, I talked about my specific contributions, what I did to help them and what I felt after doing such things. I didn't say like, oh, I was so amazing that I did this and that's it. No, I went in depth on how that made me feel and the things I specifically did. All right, last question. So the last question kind of a crazy one. Beyond what has already been shared in your application, what do you believe makes you a strong candidate for admissions to the University of California? Or what makes you unique from the rest that you could not have included in other questions? Now, this is a scary question. High risk, high reward. I say this is scary because you're essentially saying, hey, admissions officer, I saw that you gave me 6 options, but I'm going to choose my own option. And so you better do a really good job in showing why you chose this question. Again, high risk, but also high reward. If you can manage to convince them and to convince them to think, oh, this is genuinely, like you genuinely could not put this answer in any other 6 categories or any other places in your application, this is amazing. So focus on things not on your resume or application. If you're talking about your accolades, maybe talk about what that made you feel, but also remember that maybe you can talk about your accolades in other questions, This is a question that's open to you, but I wouldn't encourage you if you don't have a game plan coming into this. Make sure it is not able to be answered with previous prompts and could be used to provide more insight into parts of your application. Again, do not sound like a broken record with your application and your essays. If it's already somewhere else, they're gonna read it. They don't wanna read it again. And if you do manage to do this and believe in confidence that you can answer this question without having to answer any other questions, amazing. Props to you. And I said Beyonce because she has a song called Alien Superstar, which has unique. And so this is the main idea I want you guys to understand about this question. You have to be unique. All right. Oops, my AirPods fell. So an example for this is really hard to find because again, not the most popular question, but I grew up in an insular ethnocultural community that is proud of its pure heritage. As a biracial Mexican-American and Armenian individual attending an Armenian private school with full Armenians my entire life, I have often felt like an outsider. For example, I've heard many Armenians express serious disapproval about Armenians like my mother marrying Odars, that is, foreigners. Unfortunately, this way of thinking insults my proud Mexican American heritage. That leads me to wonder whether I am a disgrace or even a burden to my community. This thought process extends to my relationship with others. I'm often wondering if race plays into how people interact with me. So essentially, to give you a cliff notes of this person's essay, they talked about how one of their values, their core beliefs, is their pure heritage. They really, really like the heritage, the culture that comes. And if you've noticed in past essay questions, they never really allowed an opportunity for a person to talk about their heritage. That's one thing you can talk about for this question, your heritage, if you're genuinely passionate in your heritage, and it doesn't apply or you couldn't show it off to any other questions, this is the perfect opportunity. With that said, I hope you guys have an understanding or at least something that you can take from this long-winded explanation or breakdown of each question. So good luck with your essays and be unique, as Beyonce would say.
Cool. Thank you, Joel. So I'm going to take on the next part of the workshop. So let's see. Well, tough act to follow, but we'll get there. So obviously the PIQs are like the biggest, I think the area of the biggest concern for most people, because it's probably the section of the application that you're going to work the hardest for, and it's probably going to need the most of your effort. So, but the rest of the application shouldn't be ignored, and that's the rest that I'm going to go over. I'm going to go over your activities and awards, as well as the actual academic requirements for your transfer. So before I move forward, I just wanted to remind you all that the application process is a very humanistic process. I think it's very easy to forget that. It's very easy for you to think oh my gosh, this four-year university is like this big school that's like so prestigious and so elitist that they're never gonna take me. But for real, the people who are gonna be reading your applications are human too. They're probably also transfer students who ended up working for the university. I've seen admissions officers who were once transfer students who have been in your shoes, who have their own struggles and stuff like that. So really don't feel so intimidated about this process. It really is humanistic. And the way I see it now, after having transferred and had the opportunity to meet some admissions officers, it really is an opportunity for you to let them know who you are. That's literally it. You have this application process is just for you to, it's the opportunity for you to let the admissions officer have an image of you. Who are you as a person? Why do you want to go to this school? Why do you want to study this? Why do you want to study your major? And so that's really the main goal of this application process. It's not to like put you on a pedestal and like you have to be this and this and this for to be into the school. Everyone has their own stories, and I think all admissions officers know that, and they'll appreciate anything that you have to offer them. So going off that tangent, I'm gonna go into our activities and awards, and and so this is another section of the application. So if you haven't looked over the UC application yet, if you haven't started, you have 20 available spaces to list all your activities and awards, and there's no priority regarding that order. You literally, they really don't they really don't care how you list your activities. Again, this is another opportunity for the admissions officer to see who you are beyond beyond your GPA, beyond your classes. And I wanted to note that you are given 20 available spaces, but obviously it's going to be quality over quantity. Like, I don't, let's see. Like, if you feel like you're going to have to force yourself to fill all those 20 or even 10 activities, like, don't force yourself to put things you think are not going to be adding a lot of worth to your application. But if you have like 5 or 6 different activities that you know help you really grow as a person, or like will really show that admissions officer like is very reflective of who you are, put those and really describe them very well, and like just be sincere with what you put in, and 5 or 6 should be fine rather than 20 please pardon my speech, half-assed like inputs. Like, I think the admissions officers, they can read, and they are people, so they can really sense if you've like half-assed your activities and like for the sake of filling up the 20. So I'd rather like I would really recommend just like putting in your utmost sincerity into these activities and awards. And one thing that I did want to mention that I heard from an admissions officer is that in your application, nothing is seen as something that will negatively impact your application. So everything on your application is either seen as additive or positive, or additive like as in it's positive, or it's neutral. So go ahead and like show off as much as you want, because there really is no harm um in like adding stuff that you feel really is important to you. Okay, so going forward, the different activities or honors that you can mention in your application are as so. So we have educational preparation programs, extracurriculars or work or volunteers, and we also have your awards and honors. So for all of them, I think the thing in common is that they'll ask you to obviously like name the activity, name the organization that you were in, and then they will ask you what year, or like obviously I think for most of us it would be community college or so after high school. And then they would ask you to fill up this description that's about 250 to 350 characters. So that's less than 100 words. And what I wanted to mention was that in those descriptions, you want to be as detailed as possible, because you want to assume that the person reading your application knows nothing about what you've done. So don't use like, oh, I was the president of AGS, and like that's it. Like, tell them what is AGS, what is this honor society. Don't use acronyms before you explain what they are. And then of course, as Joel said before, you want to make sure to explain like what you did. So you want to explain everything on the micro level. Don't be like, oh, I found like I raised this much money for so and so organization. You have to like mention exactly how you contributed to raising that money. And if better, if you can also say like how this helped you grow as a person, or like what you learned from this activity. And then I think after that, the last section, if it's applicable, they'll ask you to put your like time commitment, which can also be reflective on like how how much like how committed you are to this activity. And of course, these time commitment, they can be rough estimates, but you have to be a bit realistic with what you put in. Okay, so just going into each of these 3 different things. So educational preparation programs, I'm going to be completely honest, like I wasn't super familiar with them before transferring, so I didn't really put any of them when I transferred. But looking at the list after reading the application again, I realized that these are actually pretty specific to schools. So like UC Berkeley has a specific educational preparation program called the Starting Point Mentorship Program. And that's a program specifically between UC Berkeley and community colleges. So what I've realized about these educational preparation programs, that like they show if you've joined them, they show like your dedication to a certain school. They'll show like, oh, they'll show the admissions officer like, oh, this student really went out of their way to like participate or like to find resources from the specific school to be more competitive in their application. So I feel like that's what you want to showcase when if you were to put an educational preparation program into your awards, into this list of awards or extracurriculars. And then of course the next one, your extracurriculars, your work, and your volunteer is pretty self-explanatory. It's like if you ever been in a club, or if you did paid work, or you did volunteer work during your time in community college or even high school, like list that down. But of course, as I mentioned before, when you describe it, you have to be as detailed as possible, and you really have to make it centered around you. So that's for your extracurriculars and your work and volunteer. Also wanted to, as a side note, I would recommend putting most of your things that you did in community college as a transfer student rather than what you did in high school. Of course, you can put stuff as you did in high school, but try to make up the bulk of it with what you did during your time in community college. Okay, and then finally, for your awards and honors, these are your scholarships or your academic awards from competitions, your recognition for community service. And so even for these, like as I mentioned before, you want to describe how you won this award. Like if it's a scholarship, what was the process like? What was the interviewing process like? Who were the target audience? How many recipients were there? If it was like an award or some sort of recognition, like what scale was it on? Was it a local school thing? Was it like on a national level? So you want to be really detailed with what that is. I mean, they really take that into account. So those are that's a rough thing over your academics, your activities and awards. And so the next thing that I wanted to go over was the academic requirements for transfer. So this is basically like what classes you need to take, making sure that academically you're ready to transfer. And like I feel like this is also a very important aspect for before you transfer. So of course, everyone when we're in community college, we're obsessed with getting the 4.0. We're obsessed with maintaining our GPA really high. But what I've learned from these admissions officers at community college is that the very important thing is that you complete all your major requirements for each and every school that you want to apply to for every major before you transfer. So what I mean by like each and every school and like and for your major is like, say between UCLA and UC Berkeley, they don't have the exact same major, and so they require different, like slightly different classes. So you want to take all those classes before you transfer. And of course, if you guys aren't familiar already, your best friend for this is going to be assist.org, where you can search up agreements between your community college and your four-year university. And you're going to have to complete everything in that required list that's transferable for your major. And I think I've mentioned this before. I like to emphasize that this is super important, because if you think about it, we might think that transferring is like we're starting a new life in this four-year university, but in reality, we are going to be transferring as third-year students. So we're going to have to be academically ready as third-year students. So if you don't have all these major requirements, even though you have a 4.0 GPA, it's going to be a really big hole in your application, and it could really hurt you. So I would really recommend making sure that you have all your major requirements finished before you transfer. So in addition to your major requirements, of course, we have your, let me see, where's the next slide. We have your general education and the minimum requirements to transfer. So I think most of you guys will have completed I Get C, and if you have, then you shouldn't be worried about this. This should be completely fine. So as you guys probably know, like I Get C is your general education requirements. This is usually required for students who are not in engineering programs, and you don't have to complete I Get C before you transfer, but I would highly recommend it. So if in the case that you don't finish I Get C before you transfer, you're gonna have to finish some sort of minimum general education requirements for transfer, and I've listed them on the slide here. So this is called the 7-course pattern, and basically it's your 2 English classes, 1 math class, and any 4 classes from these subject areas. And honestly, as long as you finish your major requirements and take like one gen ed class, you should be good to go and finish the 7 course pattern. So an example of how you could finish these last 4 classes would be like, say I was a chemistry major and like I took 3 chemistry classes, so that would fill the physical and biological sciences, and I would say like I took a philosophy class, and so that would fit up, and that would like complete the social and behavioral sciences. So that's how I could finish 7 course pattern without necessarily finishing I get C. What I wanted to note about this was that you don't have to finish I get C before you transfer, but to graduate with a bachelor's degree at a UC, you're gonna have to finish your general education requirements. So if you don't finish I get C at your community college, you're gonna have to take those classes at the university you transfer to. And I did this, and I don't really recommend that. And the only reason I say that is because 2 years really goes by very quick once you transfer, and you really want to use up as much time as you want, like you want to use up as much resources from that university as you want, and having to worry about taking your general education requirements at the 4-year university really does take up units and time that you could otherwise allocate to, say, like pursuing a minor or pursuing a double major. So that really hindered me from doing that when I transferred. So I would really recommend that you guys finish your general education requirements before you transfer. Okay, so I'm gonna hand it off to AJ, who's gonna go on to the next slide.
All right, AJ has the floor right now. Into the next slide. I think this slide is not specific for UCs. It's more into out of states and private universities. They require recommendation letters. The reason for recommendation letters, it's the only sign of legitimate proof from a second or third person perspective. So everything that you wrote down in your essays, everything you wrote down in your activities list, you want a third person, notably in this case, a professor or a school dean that knows your quality at its best, a proven quality that they have witnessed. So my advice for you is to ask only a professor that knows your quality at best, of course, a professor that you're really close with, you've engaged into his class. If the professor knows you well, hit him up. Seriously, hit them up with an email very far ahead of your app deadlines. If possible, try to hit them up latest by this December or January, because during application season, there are lots of cases where professors are not able to write you a recommendation letter. This applies to a lot of universities, and aside from the UCs, I could mention USC, Clement McKenna, University of Michigan, and lots of other private universities in both the West and the East Coasts, and all of those that require applications via the Common Application and Coalition applications outside the school application program. Recommendation letters are a focal part in the application decision, basically. So also add in the details that you'd like the professor to highlight in your recommendation letters, such as what I've mentioned: involvement in classes, extracurriculars, gradual improvements in learning, morals, leadership, talents, etc. Basically, all you want is that you want to convince the admissions officer that that you have done a lot of impact, notable impact, basically, and for them to actually express it aside from you, because yeah, at the end of the day, it's like what I've mentioned. It's basically a legitimate proof in a second or third person view's perspective that you have done something very impactful that that person has witnessed. So this is all of my tip for the recommendation letters. Yeah, on to the next slide. And here are the notable differences when you are applying between public and private universities. One thing, I'd like to reiterate the fact that public, notably the UCs, no recommendation letters are necessary. No SATs or ACT are required for the UCs. Make sure to complete your major requirements, as Odile has emphasized. I get C, and the major requirements in assist.org is the number one. If I were to say, number one would be tied between your essays and your major requirements. Your extracurriculars may come second when it comes to being able to successfully transfer. No TOEFLs are required, and the reason for this is because you're going to get most likely you're going to be from a community college or university that offers a first language English language course for first speakers, basically. So for as long as it equates to the courses that is offered within the university that you're planning to transfer. TOEFL aren't required for UCs because a lot of their courses do articulate in agreements. And of course, I would like to note the fact that if you're in a community college, you are in a better light because California do propose a bill for a better education to raise its middle class and its human resources. That 20% of all its students populations are transfers, and most notably those students transfers are from community college. So keep that optimism to mind, and hopefully they'll help during your application process. Another thing to note within private universities is that SAT or ACT vary by school, and TOEFL is required because you are not guaranteed that all of your courses between your community college or your university to be able to fully transfer into the university. I would highly suggest checking the website to be sure, or contacting via email or call if possible to the admissions office whether your courses are able to fully transfer. And basically their minimum requirement for TOEFL, and from my experiences, Duolingo helped me much better in this case. For private universities, you may also want to check their stats because they tend to be less accepting to CC transfers. They do not have any bonding proposed bills such as what state schools have or public schools have. So they owe nothing to us transfer students, and they are less accepting to transfer students because a lot of their stats when it comes to the university rankings does come from freshman stats. And the reason for that is oh well, it's just that they're less accepting to community college transfer students. Okay, I guess that's all you have to know between the difference between public and private. Onto the next slide. Just to sum things up, private universities, you are guaranteed to have the courses through articulation agreements that will transfer from community college. Check out assist.org to be sure of what you're getting. I will emphasize what Odile has said because that is really important. University applications for the University of California is due by the end of this November for transfer students. So good luck. For private universities, your courses are not guaranteed to transfer from community college, so check their respective websites. Again, it is much more challenging. Do check the transfer rates between between your previous institutions to a private universities, because many of them do vary. I do know lots of out of these Ivy Leagues that I've uploaded as an image, only one is really accepting towards transfer students. You could check that up. It's Cornell University. They have a transfer rate which is pretty interesting, above 15%, which I would say it's kind of comparable to what Berkeley has to offer. But again, check their course articulations. It is not guaranteed because you are out of state, and it's still due on the end of February, usually by the end, beginning to end of February to the beginning of March. So you have more time, but do keep in mind that it's much more challenging. On to the next slide. I will pass the floor into Marvel. Sorry. This is for important dates. All right. I will be emphasizing the important dates once again. November 30th is the deadline for UC applications. December 15th, the application update form opens. The application update forms, I would like to also emphasize the fact that when you are transferring to UC, your recent extracurriculars matters more compared to your previous ones in high school. It also applies to the job world and in the corporate world, as Odile has mentioned. And so are your grades. I would say the courses that you take within the fall, summer, and spring semester or quarter is absolutely crucial within your application in the form and by the time that you are updating, because it shows your most recent progress. And by that, it gives the most accurate measure when it comes to academic prestige. So definitely keep an eye on that one. January 31st is the deadline for the application update form. So if you have any additional grades to report, or if you dropped a class, or if you got a new job offer or a new extracurricular that you think it might be important to add within the application portal, please do so by the January 31st. March 1st is usually the decision for fall 2023 admissions. For all of the UCs, it varies by date again. So just keep a heads up for important dates. The beginning, usually for private universities, it starts for application. It starts from the beginning of February until the beginning of March. do keep a heads up on that. May 31st is the decisions, is basically the time when all of your decisions from all the UCs have been completed. They're all sent, and by the time, by June 1st, you are supposed to submit your statement of interest. So it means you have to commit to one university. And for July the 1st is your deadline to submit the final transcripts, which includes the IGESI certifications, your transcript from college, and to an extent, your high school transcript also matters, and your A-level certificates. If they do satisfy one course or two, basically, if like your years of calculus or your economics or accounting courses within a community college were satisfied because of your A-level or IB or AP, well then you have to submit your certificate. Just make sure to check out your portal, basically, for more updates. But this is something that you should worry about right after your application. So, all right, the next slide would be useful resources, and I will pass the floor to Marvel for that one.
Hey everyone, before I get started, I want to check if y'all can hear me. We good?
We could.
All right, awesome. Hi, hi Natalie. Yes, so my name is Marvel. I'm a business and data science major here at Berkeley. So I study at the House School of Business, and I'm going to talk to you through a little bit about some useful resources. I'll talk to you a little bit about Light, which is my virtual background here, and I'll give you a bit of general tips that I wish I knew when I was transferring from CC. So hopefully that sounds like a great plan. So let's start with useful resources. You know, everyone has been saying something about assist. And this is so true. There's a reason why we're repeating it like 10 times. It's because if you get the wrong classes, you won't be able to get in. You know, one of my friends got admitted to Berkeley and then got rescinded his offer during August once he already thought that he was going to Berkeley because his courses didn't matriculate right to this major requirements and he couldn't get in. So this is the importance of making sure you check assist, you check the classes that you want to take. Another thing is you can check on what IGETC. I think Odie touched upon this already, and you can check about requirements like American cultures, American history, etc., etc. This is also another tip when it comes to going to the UCs, which is check the graduation requirements. If you're hyper ambitious, like check the graduation requirements of the UC that you want to get into prior, because who knows that you can take certain classes in CC that can waive some of the requirements that you have to take later in the 4-year, right? And they'll save you a bit of time, like Odie said earlier. So that's one big thing. The second thing is really take advantage of the Student Learning Center or any tutoring center. They will help you to review your essays, do all that stuff as well. So next slide, please. Next slide. Cool. Useful resources, yes. So these apply to both public and private universities. So one, definitely check the school's application requirements. So different schools have different requirements. They have different questions, especially if you're applying to a private university, which is very, very tough. Be sure to check, know the school's culture. For example, Berkeley really values like diversity for some reason, and they value like this community vibe. And so that may be something that you want to embed into your application and embed into your essay. So again, y'all can feel free to ask me on how you will do that later on. The second thing is club networking sessions. So maybe you're part of a club already in your CC, but then if you're fortunate enough to have one of these be part of this powerhouse club, so for example, for DVC, it's probably something like PBL. That's such a great advantage because what it allows you to do is then tap into their alumni network and they will be able to help you. So for example, I'm an alumni of PBL. I served as president previously, and I'm more than happy to help people who are in PBL. And sometimes I come in, be brought in as a speaker, and you can really gain a lot of valuable information from that. Again, take advantage of Students Learning Center, all that stuff. I think that's obvious. The last thing is don't be afraid to ask current students. I am still very, very open, despite, leading Light and doing all these double major stuff and doing all this. And, Jason and Odie and Joel and everyone here, they're all still very open to, or at least I hope so, from what I know, is to helping you guys. We may take some time, but we know your struggles. We know that it's not a fun time, and we know that it's stressful. So we're down to help you as long as you give us enough time and maybe you nudge us a little bit. So that's just a bit of information there. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, Other useful resources. So I'll tell you a little bit about Light and I'll tell you why we matter. So one, we try to connect you with the best people in Indonesia. I'll show you a little bit about our mentors later on. And then two, we try to send you to the best universities in the world. So these are basically the two things that we try to do. We have some of the best people ever. We're not open to community college yet, but I just want to share just in case maybe next year we're opening a bit more to community college students. But what really matters is we have two resources that I think are super duper important. One is we've created a guide to US universities. This is a guide particularly for high school students, but I think some of it, maybe about 70% also is important for community college students, and they have the equivalent of things. So that may be something that you would want to look into. And then the second one is we have sample essays from people who have gone into UCs, gone to Ivy Leagues, gone to Stanford, like even my essays are there as well. And so that may be worth looking into as we want to reference on how you would like to write your essays. And these are this is I think like a 30-page document by now, actually, maybe longer, and well organized, all that stuff. So you might want to take a look at that. Next slide, please. Ooh, next slide. Okay, yes. So this is the essays that I was talking about, and along with the uni guide. If you all follow us at lightofficial.id on our Instagram, we'll be more than happy to send it over. I'll literally access the Instagram right after this. I'll copy and paste a message and send it personally to y'all. So if you get a message from Light, that's from me, but I'm not gonna say it's from me. Just to look a bit more professional. So do look at the essays. My essays are there. Other essays to private universities are there. So do take a look at that. We'll also send you a bonus, which is the US Universities Guide as well. So I think it'll be a very useful resource for all of you. Okay, next slide.
Sorry, there might be a lag.
No worries.
There you go.
Okay, yeah. So I just want to share a little bit about our mentors as well in Light. So these are some of our mentors. We try to connect you with the best people in Indonesia. Now, there's one more thing before. So this is not about Light or about our mentors, but I talked about, I talked a little bit about what I want to share for people who are going through CC. And so 3 things that I want to share. The first one is if you're in community college and you're a very ambitious student, which is probably like only one person here, I would recommend you to work really hard in your community college days. I know it's like, yeah, you're taking no classes and you're taking no time and you're like, it doesn't seem like there's any work, but really like, this is the time for you to work the hardest, because once you go to university, like you're getting bombarded by classes. Like the classes are 10 times harder than what you're thinking of right now. And Odie is like nodding her head because it's so true. So really think about that. So if you want to build a project, you want to build something you're passionate about, use this remaining like 6 months that you have left to build something important that you care about, right? I've had friends who've built one. I built Light during my CC days. 2, the biggest hackathon in Southeast Asia, Garuda Hacks, is built in CC. 3, one of my friends built a company also in CC. So all these things you can do, especially if you're ambitious in your community college days. It's very hard to do it once you're in school. So if you're hyper ambitious, then that's something that I would recommend. If you're not, then my advice is different. Just take your time, chill. It's probably the best. Like take a holiday or something. So different advice. The second point that I want to give is unis are only one part. So this is just a preemptive approach, because I know some of my friends who go into, they apply and then they get the decisions and they don't get into the university that they want to. First and foremost, if you get rejected from like UCLA or I don't know, whatever UCs, like maybe like UC Riverside, that doesn't mean you'll get rejected from like all the other good schools. So it's not like a tier list, right? Like, so do keep that in mind. The second thing is that unis are only one part. Yes, they are important, but the last thing that I want is for people here to be like not eating, because I have friends who like didn't eat because they didn't get into their good university, like all that stuff. Like unis are only one part, and don't worry about it too much. You've done your best. Now it's application season. Like really just put your all. And which leads me to the third part, which is if you have done your essays well and you've done your activities and whatever list done as well, then feel free to contact me. My contact is on Instagram @GOM. I might take a while to respond to you because I'll have to manage my inbox. However, if you guys put a good amount of effort in your essays, like activities list, I'll be sure to take a look at it. And the more effort that you put into the essays that I see, then I'll review it even more because I really want you to get in and get a good shot. With that being said, that kind of concludes my session, and I hope to see all of you, hopefully, in Berkeley, if that's your dream school, or other places.
Cool. Thank you so much, Marvel. If anyone's interested in learning more about Light, or like if you guys want any advice on your essays, of course, contact Marvel. He's going to be a very good resource, and I would highly recommend like talking to him if you have any questions about the application, or to any of us for that matter, honestly. So yeah, but thank you so much, Marvel. Okay, so that's the end of the content, at least. So we're gonna open up the workshop to any questions you guys have. So if you guys have any questions on any part of the of anything that we mentioned, or your own questions, just feel free to put them in the chat, or like unmute yourself, or raise your hand and we'll like unmute you. Oh, there's someone in the chat, I think. Okay, let's see. I think there was one question at the very beginning. I think, okay, so someone asked, I think for the leadership problem, how much is the taxes or profit if you want to be the leadership? So let's see, is James, I'm not sure if James is still in the Zoom call, to be completely honest. But are there any other questions? If there aren't, we can move on to the next part of the workshop, which is the networking part. But let me just give you guys like another 10 seconds if you guys have any question or a chance. Are we all good? Okay, so when and where will the recording be of the presentation be available? So we're recording this, I think, if I'm not wrong, it should be on PERMIAS Nasional YouTube channel if you want to refer back to this video. And I think you can just YouTube PERMIAS Nasional, and I think it should come up. So yes, this is going to be recorded, and if you guys want to look back to it. Okay. Okay, let's see. Can you guys hear me?
Nice.
Can you guys hear me?
We could.
Okay, cool. So all the questions that we have, let's move on to our next section. So let's see. Hopefully there are no technical difficulties with this one. Okay, so let's network. So here in so here we have with us a couple of people who have transferred from community college to four-year university. So we have people from UC Berkeley, we have some from UCLA, from UC Irvine, UC Davis, and UC San Diego. So before we break up into our into these breakout rooms, I'd like everyone to rename themselves according to like their name and their respective community college. Again, if you haven't, but if you have, so please, if you haven't, please do so. So we'll try to make it this way. So we'll do it 3 sessions of 15 minutes each, where you can break in, where you can join a room, which is either for students from North California, which is Berkeley and Davis, or South California, LA, and Irvine. And because UCSD has a lot more representatives, we have a room just for them. So feel free to like join whichever room you feel like you want. Of course, you have 3 sessions, so you have the opportunity to join any session. You have the opportunity to meet everyone at some point at the end of it. But of course, everyone has their priorities. So we're gonna be opening up. I think the breakout rooms should be opening up soon. I think they're open. So if everyone's already like updated their names and all that, if you guys are feel free to join the breakout rooms.